All you bright, beautiful, shiny people of the internet, and welcome back to another episode of Western Guy with Vedic Eyes, and as always, I'm your host, Yogi Dave Das. Namaste. So, as most of you know by now, the whole point of this show, the whole point of Western Guy with Vedic Eyes, is for me to try to explain Hinduism and some of its concepts to a mostly Western audience who have probably never really been exposed to it before. Which originally I thought was a really great idea because I myself am a Westerner who has converted to Hinduism. And since I was brought up in a traditionally Western household, I understand the Western, mostly American, mindset, and I understand the difficulties that it has when trying to grasp something as distant and unrelated to itself as Indian philosophy and particularly Hinduism. Plus, when I go out in public, being a white guy who is obviously Hindu, a lot of other white people kind of feel more comfortable coming up to me and asking all these questions that they've had, but they're a little too embarrassed to go up to Indian people and ask, even if they know for a fact that they're Hindu. So, really, you would think this whole kind of thing is kind of natural for me, in all honesty. And it is, but it does have some very fundamental challenges. And I've been thinking a little bit recently about what makes it so challenging, and a really big thing that makes it challenging is because no matter how different the religion, philosophy, or method of spirituality is, most Western people view all of it, no matter where it's from, through the lens of an Abrahamic understanding. I've noticed that even atheists will do this. Even atheists, when looking at Eastern religions and philosophy and trying to understand them, do so through the lens of understanding of what they know about religion and spiritual philosophy from an Abrahamic viewpoint, because that's how we were raised in the West, with a predominantly Abrahamic-based religious culture. So I thought I would make this video highlighting a few of the very essential key differences between religions like Christianity and Islam versus religions like Hinduism. So, to start off, when we think of religion in the West, and we're viewing it through an Abrahamic lens, we usually associate religions as having a single, easily identifiable founder, a single corpus or single organized text that is considered the Holy Scripture of the religion, and a clearly defined and easily structured philosophy. Christianity has Jesus and the Bible, Islam has Muhammad and the Quran, and they both have the clearly defined philosophy and beliefs held therein. Hinduism, however, doesn't really have any of these. Hinduism has had many, many, many spiritual masters and enlightened sages and practitioners throughout the ages, and it does not really have a single founder. If you remember back to the very first episode that we did in this series, when we talked about the scriptures, then you know that Hinduism doesn't have a single codified text. The collection of Shastras is vast and immense, and it would take the better part of a lifetime to even get through a decent chunk of it. And then on top of that, there are books still being written today that technically could be considered part of it. And instead of a single philosophy or belief system, Hinduism is home to many. You will find Hindu spiritual philosophies that are atheistic in nature. You will find ones that are theistic in nature, and even amongst the theists you find worlds of difference. There are some who choose to believe in a personal God, while others seek a realization of God as the ultimate impersonal reality. You have monotheists, henotheists, monists, dualists, non-dualists, qualified non-dualists, and you have a plethora of different traditions that put different amounts of importance and adherence to the various philosophies, scriptural texts, and the spiritual masters. See, this is all due to the fact that a very fundamental belief that is found in Hinduism is that the one God, the absolute truth, the ultimate reality, however you want to phrase it or think about it, that it is one, but it is revealed and experienced in many different ways by many different people. And this has created a very beautifully varied and pluralistic view of life itself. You know, we're all on our own individual paths, seeking truth, understanding, and meaning in life, and we all employ various different methodologies to try to attain these. Hinduism says that this is the natural way of things, and that eventually all conscious beings will attain the truth and enlightenment that they seek. You see, Hinduism, much like pretty much all of the religions to come out of the East, honestly, is what can be referred to as a sadhana dharma, meaning that it teaches the idea of engaging in the spiritual practice to explore and experience the depth of one's being, as well as to elevate the consciousness and ultimately understand not only the self, but also the relationship between the individual soul and what can be referred to as the divine or God. Hinduism understands that everyone has different temperaments and we're all at different points in our spiritual and individual development, and that there really can't be a one-size-fits-all religion for the masses. However, Hinduism also says that every single aspect of life, no matter what or where, can be made spiritual, and anything and everything can be used as a stepping stone to reach the heights of our spiritual capabilities. And that this experience of ultimate truth and enlightenment can be hooked into and can be experienced by anyone, anywhere, from any country, any culture, and of any faith. From the Hindu standpoint, life is seen as an experience in which we explore the dimensions of our own being, realize the essence of who and what we really are, and therefore ultimately will realize what our relationship is to that realm and dimension of existence that one calls God, or the divine, or the higher spiritual existence. And the reason that we can do this, and the reason that anybody from anywhere can do this, is because we are intrinsically, at our core center, made of, and are one with, in some capacity, that which we call the divine. Every school of Hinduism acknowledges that there is a oneness between the individual soul, the Jiva Atman, and the Supreme Soul, the Para Atman. Now, the different schools of thought may argue as to the technicalities of how exactly that oneness works and is experienced, but the idea that we are in some way eternally one with and is inseparable from the divine is an intrinsic part of Hindu theology and philosophical understanding. This is all extremely different from Christianity and Islam, which, even though there are wonderful, valid, spiritual teachings to be had in these faiths, at the end of the day are salvation theologies.
What we mean here is that these religions claim that humanity, in its natural state, is inherently sinful, and this sin separates man from God. This is why man needs to be saved, because without salvation, we will be eternally separated from God by being thrown into hellfire, where we will be burned and tortured for all eternity. Oh, and some interpretations suggest that God's ministering angels, the ones that are supposed to look after you, well, they'll be the ones to throw you into the pit of fire. Try to look at those inspirational statuettes in places like Hallmark again without being terrified. Islam and Christianity also each claim that salvation can only be found by following their particular revelation. If one does not attain salvation through the sacrifice of Christ on the cross or the revelation of the Quran, then one is lost. According to these salvation religions, life is a test set by God to see if we are worthy of being saved, and a big part of that test is professing exclusive belief in the religion's ability to lead you to being saved and adherence to the doctrines of that religion.
This is why members of Salvation Theology religions tend to divide the world into strict dichotomies: good versus evil, the faithful versus the faithless, the saved versus the damned, believers versus non-believers.
These defining points of viewing life as a test, man as intrinsically separate from God, and the need for salvation and claim of exclusive truth are major distinctions from Hinduism, which states that man is one with God, and life is an experience which serves to change and transform us and aid in our spiritual revelation and evolution. Hinduism makes no exclusive claims to the truth, teaching that enlightenment and the experience of the Absolute is accessible to all people from all faiths and all walks of life. Salvation religions depend on adherence to doctrines and stories surrounding the figures they are based on. Because of this, there is an intrinsic need to be able to view the stories and doctrines within a literal historical context. This means that they will force their spiritual narrative onto reality to defend the validity of their claims. Ever wonder why Christian fundamentalists are so against evolution? Because it shows that the Adam and Eve story is not literally true. And therefore, the themes of the story, being that we were created as perfect beings and we chose to rebel against God's perfection, is also not true. And that casts the biblical view of history into disarray, but it also removes the occurrence of original sin, and therefore the need for salvation through Christ. These same people are also usually climate change deniers, and this is related to the fact that if the Bible is literally true, then according to the Noah's Ark story, God already flooded the world once and promised that he would never do so again. This calls the entire idea of being able to view the Bible as literal historical truth into question. Likewise, if it could ever be proven that Abraham did not build the Kaaba, or that the Quran was written by a group of people over several years and edited several times, instead of being directly dictated by the Archangel Gabriel to Muhammad, then it would call all the historical literalism of the doctrines of Islam into question, and therefore would call into question the idea that this is law given directly by the mouth of God to humanity to follow. Such questioning must not be allowed to happen if a salvation religion is going to be able to claim exclusiveness to the ultimate truth. That's why whenever very serious inquiries like this ever come up, religious fundamentalists go into the realm of apologetics, trying very hard to craft semi-coherent arguments against the questioning of the religion. Hinduism, however, does not face this kind of challenge. You see, when a religion claims exclusive truth and the threat of eternal damnation exists for those who don't accept said exclusive truth, it creates an extremely high-stakes gambit which requires the doctrines and principles of said religion to be testably true. Hinduism makes no such claims about itself and does not create such desperate high-stakes situations. Beyond that, the stories found within Hindu scriptures do not require a literalist reading to be valid. While it is possible to view the tales of the Shastra as at least semi-historical accounts, since they are tied into the major historical events over the evolution of Indian culture, their true value lies in the inward experiences they create within the devotee. While we do say that these narratives exist as a certain aspect of reality, it's not necessarily the material one. Much like the Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, they reside in a conceptual realm where they have happened, are currently happening, and will continue to happen into eternity. And from this eternally existent conceptual realm of hidden reality, they continue to affect us and change us and transform us. They are meditations that guide us through the various levels of conscious and unconscious experience, impart philosophical truths and wisdom, and deepen our loving devotions. To view them as only literal historical accounts and nothing more actually cheapens the splendid experiential mysteries that they hold. However, the need for literal and historical interpretation of doctrine is not the only problem that salvation theologies create for themselves. There are in fact many other ones. While Hinduism can be truly seen as a universal faith in and of the sense that it says that truth and enlightenment are experiential and therefore able to be obtained by anyone from anywhere, and that there is no final day of judgment nor the risk of eternal damnation, salvation theologies claim that the threat of eternal damnation is very much a reality, and God has crafted there to be one particular way to avoid that fate, and yet it has not been revealed universally. It was revealed to a select group of people in a select geographic location one time, and that was it. This is what causes members of salvation theologies to view the world in dichotomies of good versus evil and believers versus non-believers. It is also this that drives them to expand, to conquer, and to convert as many people as possible under the assumption that unless they do so, others cannot be saved. This worldview brings up several large questions that do not have clear answers.
For one thing, what about the millions of people who either lived and died before the revelation was given to this select group of people to spread to the world, or who lived and died during that time but never got the chance to actually hear it? What happens to them? They just go to hell for all eternity? Simply for the circumstances of their birth? Now, apologists from both Christianity and Islam have said that this cannot possibly be the case because God, or Allah, is all-merciful and all-loving. So a lot of these apologists on both sides have come up with this kind of odd theory that, well, obviously, what God does is he judges people based on their ability to know the truth. Meaning that if a person had no possible way in their life to hear the revelation of Christ or the revelation of the Quran, then God would judge that person based upon standards of before the existence of the revelation, meaning that he would judge them differently. I'd like to point out that nowhere in the Bible or the Quran is this idea put forward. It's just something that apologists have come up with to kind of backpedal over a very obvious problem in their theology.
It also kind of disproves the necessity for either Christianity or Islam, because if God could clearly judge people based on whatever standards existed before either Christianity or Islam, then why do we need this one? And then on top of that, doesn't that technically mean there are multiple ways to God? So how does that work?
And then on top of that, if God is not going to judge us by the standards of the revelations of either Christianity or Islam because we don't hear about them and can't hear about them, then wouldn't the best thing to do be never to spread the message anywhere? Make sure no one ever hears it or knows about it ever. Therefore, no one would be judged by the standards of it?
One could also ask that if God was powerful enough to create the universe in any order that he saw fit, why would he create it this way, where there is such a high possibility for us to fail and suffer damnation for all eternity, for finite crimes, by the way, which is another thing that doesn't really make much sense. On top of that, if there really was only one way for us to attain salvation, why wouldn't God make himself consciously known to us from the moment of our birth and give us clearly and decisively the instructions for how to attain that salvation? Why does he allow us to be born in various different circumstances and experience various different things throughout our lives that make us more prone to accepting or believing one thing over another?
Another very common problem is, what about all the people who are righteous in the sense that they really strive to be a good person in their daily life and they try really hard to help other people and to serve humanity, and who long for spiritual truth? What happens to those people when they don't belong to the right religion? A person can live all their life being as good and righteous and worthy as possible, and they'd still go to hell for all eternity simply for not accepting the right revelatory teaching? Again, both Christian and Muslim apologists have said that all truly righteous people who long for justice and truth will be led to their way of thinking, because obviously all people who are righteous must eventually agree with them because they have the only exclusive path to truth. This argument is just downright insulting because it suggests that all the people who belong to the various faiths of the world, who sincerely with all of their heart believe in what they're doing, are somehow just lying, and that their devotions are worthless because they're insincere. Because if they were truly that righteous but sincere, they would either come to Christianity or Islam. Beyond that, this argument is insulting to the entire human experience, because this means that not only virtue, but everything in our lives, all of the transformative and amazing experiences that we have while alive, are essentially worthless and mean virtually nothing unless we accept the right way to God.
Salvation theology apologists have argued and will continue to argue that anyone who honestly looks at either Christianity or Islam with any amount of sincerity and openness would logically come to the conclusion that their religion is correct. They argue that there is evidence for this, but in truth, there is not. There has never been any definitive, irrefutable proof of either Christianity or Islam. Instead, what we have is an impossibly large collection of arguments, counter-arguments, claims, conjecture, nothing definitive. Hinduism exists free of all these issues. Because it does not make exclusivist claims on the absolute truth, nor does it suggest the high-risk gambit of salvation or damnation, it exists free of the stress of having to try to prove itself to others. It does not wish to conquer. It does not wish to convert. Adherents of Hinduism engage in the spiritual practices not to save their souls, not to make God love them more, but to elevate and transform their consciousness, to bring peace, serenity, and balance into their life. There is no obligation to believe or not believe. There is no obligation to put any more or less energy or devotion into the practice than what you want. Take from it what you will, and nourish the areas of your life that need that nourishment, dependent upon your want, your desire, and your situation. Now, some people may say that I'm being a little too harsh here, and that I'm asking too much. They may argue that God is infinite and works in mysterious ways, and therefore we can never really have solid answers to these problems and questions. And I have only one response for that. That answer just isn't good enough. And it never will be. If you are going to tell me that the fate of my eternal soul rests on a razor's edge of either spending an eternity in paradise or an eternity in torment and suffering, and then you tell me that there is only one way to ensure the outcome of that fate, you had better bring strong, convincing, solid arguments and proofs to the table. And if you fully understand the weight and severity of that situation and everything that it suggests, you cannot honestly tell me that the God who created the universe in such a high-stakes way and then revealed the only way to get out of that bad situation to a handful of people in the Middle East once, and then trusted that we would be able to figure it out on our own, and that if we didn't, that's our own fault, and then tell me that that God is unconditionally loving, merciful, and deserving of my eternal praises.
I want to make this perfectly clear. The point of this video is not to say that there is completely nothing valid whatsoever about Christianity and Islam. Both faiths have beautiful teachings and sub-traditions within them, and there have been many beautiful, wonderful Christians and Muslims who have used the methodology of their faith to delve into themselves and to realize their connection with God and to have beautiful and transformative experiences. What I am saying, however, is that the Salvation Theology, the exclusive claims to the absolute truth, this needs to stop. Christianity and Islam needs to change. They need to shift from an exclusivist salvation theology to a pluralistic sadhana dharma, to a methodology for realizing and raising spiritual consciousness within one's own life that does not condemn others for doing the same their own way.
This world needs more people like Master Hazrat Inayat Khan, the Sufi mystic, poet, and musician who brought the spellbinding and enrapturing message of Sufi Islam and brought it to the West in a way that bridged between people of all faiths and all creeds, and awakened the spark of divine love within the hearts of thousands. It needs more people like Bishop John Shelby Spong, who served as the Episcopal Bishop of Newark, New Jersey for many, many years, very faithfully. An accomplished lecturer, author, and theologian, Bishop Spong spends most of his time traveling, speaking, and trying to teach that to be a Christian is not just to have faith in Jesus, but to practice the message that he gave, and that coming to God in full divine realization is not something that is exclusive to Christianity.
Or even people like my friend, Michael, one of my best friends in the whole world, And he's a Christian.
He actually has a channel here on YouTube where he does stuff like ukulele covers. You know, stuff to get people happy and getting them enjoying their day. I'll actually leave a link in the description down below to his channel. You guys should go. Watch him. Give him a couple likes. He's awesome.
And he takes his faith very seriously. He goes to church every week. He's involved with what goes on. He loves his faith. But at the same time, he doesn't believe that everyone who doesn't believe like him is going to go to hell. He believes that to be a Christian, one must have more than just faith in Jesus. One must have faith in the message of Jesus and try to practice what Jesus taught in the Gospels. And he believes that those higher spiritual concepts are universal in nature and can be found and achieved by anyone from any culture of any faith. He is a Christian, but he has a very pluralist, loving, and accepting view of life. And if the terms interfaith dialogue or interfaith interaction or coexistence are going to actually be worth anything, we all need to start considering this style of theology and spiritual practice. Alright guys, so that's it for this video. I hope you liked it. Please hit the like button if you did. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you get notified whenever I make a new video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. As always, remember that you can follow me on my Twitter at YogiDevdas. And as always, I want to thank you for watching. Guys, I love you all so much. Without your continued support, nothing I do on here is worthwhile, honestly. So thank you for joining me for this episode of Western Guy with Vedic Eyes. Don't forget to come back on Sunday for the next Indian horror movie review, because, you know, we like to have fun here on the weekends. And as always, guys, I love you. Goodbye. And namaste.